Hi, geeks. Michael here. Welcome to another free preview of Wizards, the podcast guide to comics. In this episode, we're talking about Wizard World 2000, where Adam has a great conversation about the event and the history of Wizard World and all that cool stuff.
Greetings, geeks, and welcome to a special edition of Wizards, the podcast guide to comics. We are just closing down, winding down this era of the convention for the year 2025, but we want to take you back to the year 2000. That's right. Recently, for the archives, we were able to obtain the official convention program for the Wizard World Chicago 2000 event. This is something that starting in 1997, Wizard was very, very heavily into the convention world. They had dabbled, they had appeared in other conventions prior to this, but then they purchased the Chicago Comic Con. And from that point on, it was full force bringing the world their brand of comic book convention. And we are going to get into that with somebody very important to us here at Wizards. We love our patrons. And one of our longtime patrons is someone who, every time we brought up Wizard World, was like, I was there at all those events. I was always attending. And we know that there are stories to be had, and we are going to get those today. So, Juan, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me on.
So this is very fun. Like I say, you are that voice in the wilderness who is always touting Wizard World and telling us what awesome events they were. But before we talk about your walking the floor and everything you were taking in, we got to figure out where it all started for you. Why Wizard? Why comic books? So please tell us your origin story.
Oh well, I'm old. I am going to be 54 years old in a couple of weeks. And as a kid, we I lived in Chicago and I had family that lived in New York. So we would take summer trips to New York. On the way there, we'd stop at the various rest stop stores and they would always have bad comics. So I always would get comics to read on the trip. And my cousin in New York was heavily into comic books, especially X-Men, Marvel, and DC. I wasn't really reading those. I was more into Archie and Casper and Hot Stuff, the Harvey comics. But he would give me a couple of Marvel comics for the trip home. He would give me a few of them. And I just really enjoyed comics. Grew up watching the Batman 66 series. Obviously, the Spider-Man cartoon was a major influence on me. Super Friends cartoons on Saturday morning. And it was around we went to my mom took me to a mall one time and there was a B. Dalton bookseller there and they had this giant wall of nothing but comic books. I begged my mom for 60 cents for one comic in particular that drew my attention. I had heard about these X-Men and I heard they were the hottest thing around. And there was this book called X-Men issue 171, the issue where Rogue joined the team. And I never forget the cover. It's Welcome to the X-Men, Rogue. Hope you don't, you survive the experience. And I'm like, well, I'm being welcome to the X-Men. I got that comic, read it from cover to cover over and over again. And I decided to have my mom take monthly trips to the B. Dalton booksellers, and I would get like two or three comics a week. Couldn't go over like a buck 25, go figure. Um, And that's pretty much how it started from there. I eventually found a comic book shop that I could ride my bike to, and I've been in and out since then. Now I don't really go to a comic shop. I don't really have one within distance from me. I live in a very rural part of Florida where nothing really exists. And so I do the subscription to the Marvel app, the DC app, and Hoopla, of course.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great when you could be introduced to it through someone who's a super fan and then you get to, jump into that world yourself and really claim it and say, this is for me. So this is my question though. Obviously, you love Wizard as well. You bring up Wizard a lot in the comments that you leave for us when we're posting things. So I'm curious to know, is there a particular Wizard memory of just reading the magazine, a particular issue that mattered to you, even just a cover that you thought was cool as you were getting deeper into your collecting?
My first issue of Wizard, which was number 11. I went to a comic, I was going, like I said, I had found a comic book shop that I could ride my bike to, and I was getting a CBG, Comics Buyer's Guide, big newspaper, bulky thing. I was enjoying it because I wanted to find out more about the business and everything like that. But basically a newspaper, and there was this Wizard magazine that I had been hearing about. It was issue number 11 with Spawn on the cover. Picked it up, and I was like, looked at the comic book store owner. I'm like, can I get this every single time it comes out afterwards? I'm like, because it related more to, it wasn't. It wasn't like Comics Buyer's Guide where it was just all seriousness. There was some fun in there.
Yeah, definitely. That was the appeal of the magazine. It had some attitude, it had some humor, and I think yeah, that's definitely what set it apart at the time. So we hear like that there those more serious collectors like, oh, they're not taking it
Hmm.
seriously enough. But certainly that's what most people found in those pages and really wanted to get more of that each and every month. So that's great that you were on board that early.
Yeah.
Now, the other question I have is so we know that Wizard World started off as the Chicago Comic Con. So, what is your first convention experience? Was it there in Chicago? Was it that big event? Was there a smaller event? Like, how did you get into attending those types of things?
There were smaller events, but I never made it to those. I did make it to the first Rosemont Convention Center event, which was in '93, which is back when it was Chicago Comic Con. I did make it to that one, and I only went for one day. I found out that I could take a train from my house to pretty much about 4 blocks away from the convention center. So I just went one day and walked, had a time of my life. It was like something, because back in that day, you kind of hid your geekness. You didn't really walk around with a t-shirt that had Superman on it or even a hat that had Superman on it. You went through those doors and it was, these are my people, you know? And I talked to complete strangers. I got to talk to some artists and writers that I didn't really at the time know exactly who they were because it was hard to put a name to a face because there wasn't really that much out there. So it was just like, I know your name, you know? Um, but yeah, I had the time of my life. And so the year after that, again, I went only for like one day. And it was like the year, I want to say maybe the year before Wizard bought it is when I went 3 days in a row, where it was like $20 for 3 days, which was a lot of money back then. Oh, go figure. Um, seeing what conventions cost now. But yeah, and that was the first time I was there all 3 days. And it soon evolved where I finally got a friend that was into comics as much as I was into, and me and him, I started talking him into coming all 3 days with me. And I want to say 2000 was the second year where me and him made it all 3 days.
Wow. Okay. So that is awesome. Yeah. Even more fun to have a friend that could go along with you to that. But I love to hear about that evolution. It was just like, this is the place to be every year. It sounds like you're looking forward to it. So now here's the big question. What did you notice was the big difference from when you were attending prior, to Wizard taking over and when it becomes Wizard World? Was there a noticeable difference in the experience, or did you feel like for you it was always, you were there for the same reason?
The show pretty much evolved every year for me. We got like I remember when Wizard bought it, people were like complaining and being down, and I'm like, this might be a good thing. And I didn't really notice much of a change that first year, except that everything was bigger. And there was more interactivities, like because you had the Wizard booth there and people from Wizard interacting, the Wizard wheel, which I never did a stunt. I always just asked them the trivia question, which was always a Debbie Gibson question because that was the only thing I figured I can stump them on. Um, but yeah, it felt it was like more interactive once Wizard had it. And as the years progressed, I don't even want to, we'll get into that later.
But I love hearing that because, yeah, it wasn't just in the pages of the magazine that they were making everybody feel welcome and accepted. It was on the floor. It's just like, yeah, we want everybody to be a part of this. We want to interact with you. So that is cool to hear. Well, I'm excited to talk about this year. 2000, obviously, everybody's excited about that year. Oh, things are coming, everybody talking about the millennium and all these different things. There was a buzz in the air. So I'm curious to see how things were evolving for Wizard as well as they were going into this essentially just their third year of running a convention. But we remember in the pages of the magazine, boy, they were promoting this stuff so heavily.
Oh
You'd
yeah.
have like 2-page ads and then another 2-page ad, like just they would fill the magazine telling you everybody who's going to attend, whether it was comic book creators, whether it was celebrities, or what exclusives you could get there, all of these different enticements to get people to buy their tickets and show up there. Most of the time kids were free, as I recall, so it's like kids
Yep.
under a certain age. So for you, just looking at 2000, do you recall whether it was in your collecting or what you saw advertised? Was there anything in particular you were looking forward to? Did you ever go with a plan in mind? Or for you, was it just like, no, every year this is an experience, I'm going to let it take me where it takes me?
It was a little bit of every year. This is an experience that it take me where it takes me, but there were exclusives involved. And I wish this program showed all the exclusives because I was talking to my buddy last night about this. I'm like, I want to remember 2000 in particular, but a lot of the memories are all just kind of merged into one by this time. But in particular, the exclusives, and I noticed in this one they showed the Buddy Christ, but I know that wasn't a 2000 exclusive. That was a 99 exclusive because I bought that before the movie came out. And that was I was a huge Kevin Smith fan, and that's another thing I'll bring up. I want to say it was the 2000 show. Back then, there wasn't really a charge for autographs or anything like that. And Kevin Smith kind of just hung out. There wasn't like a big mob or a long line for him. He was just hanging out. And I am an ex-smoker, um, of cigarettes. Um, and I was outside smoking a cigarette, and Kevin Smith actually used my lighter to light up one of his cigarettes. He actually bummed a light off me. And again, it wasn't like a big deal. It was just like, hey, you're one of us, it's cool. And I want to say that was at this 2000 show. That's one memory I have of this 2000 show. I do have another one with Tyler Main, who was a guest at this 2000 show, where me and my buddy got his autograph, and he spelled my name wrong, and I wasn't going to correct him on that because he was a way bigger person than me.
Well, let's get into that here because, yeah, that was definitely a big draw of these shows is who you can meet, meet your favorite creators. And so every year they would have a guest of honor, as Frank Miller one year, it was like whoever they could get to be a big draw and get people's attention. Now, this year, interestingly enough, it was J. Michael Straczynski who, had come on strong, writing Rising Stars. Midnight Nation was coming out around this point. Like he was getting his own imprint at Top Cow. And of course, he was on his way to start writing Spider-Man at Marvel. So I mean, this was a big, moment for him as a creator, definitely. Not that Top Cow wasn't a big deal to us comic fans, but in the mainstream sense, for him to get over there and write Spider-Man. So that is when they promote. But what I found so interesting is remember, Wizard had Wizard Magazine, but they had Toy Fair, they had Inquest, they had, Bean Power for a short time. They had so many different magazines and different worlds of fandom that they celebrated. So they have a Toy Fair special guest. And this really jumped out at me. It is a guy named Digger. Okay, we're going to read Digger's interesting bio here. They say Digger redefined toy sculpting when he opened Art Asylum, now one of the leading toy sculpture studios in the United States. Everything from Space Ghost to 24-inch Kiss figures to WCW wrestlers have been born in Digger's studios. The The colorful and creative sculptor is a fervent proponent of sculptor recognition in the toy industry. He even had his name legally changed to Digger, which is amazing. And this guy, he looks like he either belongs in a boy band or maybe like in some post-apocalyptic film, like he's got a look.
He's very 2000s.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing look he's got going here. Now, I have to say, for me, what jumped out, obviously, longtime listeners of the show know I'm a huge Kiss fan. And I remember these 24-inch Kiss figures sold at Spencer's Gifts.
Yep.
And they actually, like, you would push them and they played a song. Like, they were so cool. Like, there was the McFarlane figures, which were standard, dimensions. And then these ones, you were just like, I can't believe it. Like, I wanted them so bad. They had them up like on their upper display shelf. So you couldn't just like grab them and destroy them, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, the fact that Digger was involved in making the creation of those figures made him my hero. So
Thanks for checking out this free preview. You want to see this and more and the uncut version of all of our episodes? Go to our Wizards Patreon, which is patreon.com/wizardscomics. As well as you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, or whatever they call it now. Like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more. See you next time.